What's up, everybody? Marley Cross 316 back with another comic book flashback. Today we are looking at Ultimate Spider-Man issue number 15, and today's title is Confrontations. So we got a lot going on. We're continuing to look at the storyline here. We saw last issue how Dr. Octopus basically broke out of that governmental hospital that he was with, and now he's on the loose. And now we also know from last issue that he is a murderer. He's a cold-blooded murderer. And so we have to deal with the threat of Dr. Octopus as we continue to look at this story here. As we get into now this issue, we see that we start out the issue right off the bat with this house, and there's this woman. She's exercising, and she's talking to somebody on the phone, and the person on the television that's basically she's listening to keeps saying 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2. So she's doing this exercise. She's talking to some random person on the phone. All of a sudden, she hears a crash downstairs in her living room, and she's starting to wonder what in the world was that. And so she said, I gotta go. And so she starts hearing a lot of scraping and thumps and thumps here. Somebody definitely gets killed here down below, and then we see in the shadows it looks like one of Dr. Octopus's tentacles here, and so now this woman is starting to get pretty scared to death, and I would be too. And we see more tentacle arms are going upstairs. There's the shadows, and then we see that this woman's fate is sealed here as one of Dr. Octopus's tentacles strikes this woman, and she is dead. And so now we're going to move on into other issues here. We will recall from last issue how Kong basically believes that Peter Parker is now Spider-Man. He's been thinking a lot about a lot of scenarios that have happened in the past, as we've seen basically how Peter Parker was good at basketball. He's been able to defend himself against bullies. Remember the spider bite on that field trip? So he's going to go to his best friend, Flash Thompson, and we see that Liz Allen also is going to overhear this, and she's going to contribute to the conversation. So he basically says, Flash Thompson says, "You are absolutely whacked out of your mind." And Kong says, "Listen," and he says, "You're whacked." And he says, "I whacked." And then Kong says, "I figured it out." And so Kong is going to basically explain to them. He's like, "Remember on that field trip last semester?" And he said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Yeah, I remember how he got bitten by that spider. That was pretty funny." And he said, "Well?" He said, "Well, what? He's Spider-Man." And so Flash Thompson and Liz Allen, they're not going to listen to Kong. They think he's just a nut. And they say, "How does that make him Spider-Man?" And then Flash Thompson raises up his sleeve and says, "Look, I was stung by a bee. Does that make me Bee-Man?" And he's just not taking it serious. And he says, "Look at Peter over there. He's at his locker. Why don't you go ask him if he's Spider-Man? Plus, we've seen Spider-Man in the past when he came to fight the Green Goblin in our school. He's like 6 foot tall. Look at Peter Parker. He's nowhere near the stature of Spider-Man. But why don't you go ask him yourself?" So Kong is like, "You know what? I'll get the courage to do it. I'm going to do it right now." And so that's exactly what we're going to see. Kong is basically being dared by Flash Thompson and Liz Allen to go and basically kick Peter Parker right square in the nuts. So this is not going to be crazy. This is going to be crazy stuff here. But I think this once again is going to tell the tale here whether Peter Parker is going to use his spider sense to basically get out of this dangerous predicament. So Peter Parker's bent down. He's getting something out of his locker. And so Kong is going to then race up right next to Peter Parker, who is basically slouched over. He knows that something's going on because Peter Parker senses with his spider sense. But Peter Parker knows that it has to be a bully, and he can't reveal his secret identity to anybody by dodging out of the way, because that will reveal to Kong that Kong is true to what he's saying. So Peter Parker is going to take the full brunt of this attack. Mary Jane Watson's watching from a distance, and boom, we see right here, doesn't kick him in the nuts, but pretty much in the butt here. And so, I mean, that was pretty painful to even look at. And so Peter Parker's like, ow, 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 like that. And he's like, owie, ow, why did you, ow? And so Flash Thompson's laughing. And then Peter Parker's like, what is wrong with you? And so we see all of a sudden, we recall how last issue we saw the first appearance of Gwen Stacy. Gwen comes to the defense of Peter Parker here, and she's like, you ever do something like that again, he said, I'll stick you like a fat pig you are. And she pulls out a knife. I mean, Peter Parker's like, uh-oh. And so this is gathering a lot of people's attentions, and we see here that all of a sudden the school principal comes and he's like, what is this? Why don't you kids ever learn to leave well enough? And then he sees the knife that's on the ground, and he's like, and what is this now, huh? What is this? And then he looks at Gwen and says, Stacy, great way to start at your new school. Second day here, come with me. And so he takes Gwen by the hand, and she's going to the principal's office. And then we see that Captain Stacy is at the scene right now, as we see here that that woman was killed by Dr. Octopus, and he gets a phone call from the principal, and we just see some of the destruction that Dr. Octopus did here. That woman definitely died a pretty gruesome death. So yes, we see here that George Stacy is going to answer the phone, and we see here that he learns that Gwen got in a fight at school and that she had a knife. And so we see here, and he said, what do I think? I think you should confiscate the knife and put her back in the class for now. For now. We, her parents, will deal with it ourselves when we get home. And then we see here that as George Stacy gets off the phone, he's stopped by none other than the Daily Bugle's own Ben Urich. I believe that's how you pronounce his name, Urich or Urich. But anyway, Ben asks him about what's going on, what happened, and he says supposedly it was a murder scene, and we see traces of Dr. Octopus here. And we see that Ben Urich is very, very acquainted with the story of Dr. Octopus, as we soon will find out. So, as we continue the story, we see here that Spider-Man's going to stop this guy who's basically robbed somebody, mugged this woman's purse, and basically he's going to save the day here and stop this guy. And he does it in front of a lot of people, and some of the people that we'll soon see are going to be J. Jonah Jameson and Joe Robertson. So Peter Parker, or as Spider-Man, basically stops this thief, gives back the purse. The woman then runs because she's scared of Spider-Man. And he's like, see that? A guy can't jump around in his underwear and make a spectacle of himself without the ladies acting like he's some kind of guy running around in his underwear making a spectacle of himself. And then he sees J. Jonah Jameson. He said, hey, aren't you J. Jonah Jameson, editor of the Chief of the Daily Bugle? And then he said, aren't you the guy printing that totally made-up garbage about me just to sell newspapers? Well, I only have one thing to say to you. What's he going to do? He's going to leap off and just say, love the paper, it's hysterical. And so we see here that J. Jonah Jameson's like, wow, I thought he was going to. And Joe's like, yeah. And then Jameson's like, I really did. Joe says, maybe he isn't the maniac you want him to be, Jonah. So we see then that Jonah Jameson is about to walk into the Daily Bugle when he falls on his face here. He trips over the person that's been webbed to the ground. So now Jameson comes back to his office. He's trying to use an ice pack to heal his head. Ben Urich comes to the office and delivers this news about Dr. Otto Octavius. They think Dr. Otto Octavius is dead, but we see here that Ben Urich has been able to discover some files here, and the code name is Octagon from his source. He says, a few weeks ago, I came in here and told you that my sources confirmed that Octavius was taken to a government hospital medical facility somewhere in South Jersey. And we see here that none of them are really believing what Ben is saying, but they have no other choice but to agree with him that Dr. Octopus is alive, that Dr. Octavius survived that explosion at Osborne Industries, and now we see here that Dr. Octopus, as they continue to talk, is now on the loose, this wanted murderer here, and Ben Urich now is given the task by Jameson to search for Dr. Otto Octavius. And we see here that Jameson even asked Joe Robertson, and he says, "You know what I think." And then basically Jameson says, "All right, Ben, find the good doctor for us." And we see that Peter Parker was listening outside of the conference room. And so we see that now Peter Parker knows that Otto Octavius is alive. And so we'll probably see in next issue Peter Parker as Spider-Man go up against Dr. Octopus for the first time. Maybe that will happen. We'll see as we continue this story. So I'm glad that you were able to watch this, and hope you continue to tune in to this series, as it is one of my most requested series at this point. And I'm happy for the feedback that I've been getting so far on this series and other series as well. So go ahead, give this video a like, comment down below what you liked about this video, and I will see y'all in the next one.